If you had to choose between honor and love, which would you choose? I reckon most folks would say honor. Sounds noble, don't it? Like something you can carve into a gravestone and be proud of. But let me tell you, when the cold creeps into your bones and the years settle behind your eyes, it ain't honor you remember. It's the way she laughed when no one was listening. It's the lace ribbon she tied in your hand before you rode out. It's love, even when it wasn't allowed. Dust Creek wasn't much to look at in the winter of '79. A string of wood buildings sagging under gray skies, the ground frozen hard as old regrets. Men came to Dust Creek to lose themselves, miners, cowboys, drifters, and when they wanted to forget the ache of their lives, they walked through the swinging doors of the Scarlet Lantern, and there she was, Ruby, red hair, white skin like milk, and a mouth made for trouble. Folks called her the Painted Lady, but no paint ever matched her eyes. They were a color between storm clouds and whiskey. She moved like smoke, slow, soft, slipping into the cracks of men's hearts. But she didn't let anyone in. Not really. Not until him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Ruby wasn't born for the brothel. No woman is, really. Word around town was she came from a preacher's family out east. Something happened, nobody knew what, and she ended up in Dust Creek with a new name and too much sadness in her smile. Some nights, she'd hum to herself as she brushed her hair, looking out the dusty window like she was remembering a home that no longer wanted her. I was just a stable hand back then, kept to myself. But I watched her the way a man watches fire, afraid to touch it, but drawn all the same. And I wasn't the only one. That winter, a stranger rode into town. He didn't look like much. Brown coat, travel-worn boots, eyes too serious for his age. He tied his horse out front and walked straight into the saloon like he'd been there before. That was Caleb Winslow? Nobody recognized him at first. But old Reverend Winslow did. That was his son, come back after 5 years away at seminary or college, or some eastern city full of books and fine coats. The boy who'd once preached fire and brimstone on the steps of the chapel now stood in a room full of whiskey and women, staring straight at Ruby. I saw it happen, the way her smile dropped when their eyes met, like she'd just seen a ghost wearing her own memories. He didn't come to her right away, just sat at the corner table, quiet, sipping coffee instead of bourbon, watching her with the kind of eyes a man uses when he's not trying to own a woman, just understand her. And that scared her more than anything. You see, men always wanted Ruby's body. Caleb wanted her soul. That night, after the saloon emptied and the lanterns dimmed, she stood by the window again. But this time, she wasn't humming. She just stared at the church tower in the distance, and for the first time in a long while, her hand trembled. I think she knew that if she let that man near her heart, it wouldn't be a fling, it'd be forever. And women like Ruby don't get forever. They get $5 and a promise to forget. But some things, some people, you just can't forget. I've lived long enough to know love ain't always clean. Sometimes it grows in the worst places, like flowers pushing through cracks in the stone. You can't explain it. You can't plan for it. You sure as hell can't stop it. And that was the beginning of the end. The first look, the first silence, the first moment where both of them knew the rules, and both of them were about to break them. Because love don't care about towns or fathers or fast sins. Love just happens, and that's exactly what it did. In Dust Creek, in the middle of nowhere, between a preacher's son and a painted lady. Tell me, If you had to choose between who you are and who you love, would you choose yourself? Or would you become someone new, just for the chance to hold them? If you had to walk back into the place that broke you, just to follow your heart, would you do it? Caleb Winslow did. He left Dust Creek as a boy, still wearing his daddy's shadow. Came back a man with quiet fire behind his eyes. The town had changed little. The same cracked road, same crooked cross atop the chapel steeple. But Caleb, he wasn't the same. You could see it in the way he moved, like someone who'd carried too much silence for too long. He walked like he'd been hurt by the world and still chose not to hate it. I remember the first morning after he returned. He stood outside the chapel, hands in his coat pockets, staring at the building like it was a grave marker. His father, Reverend Josiah Winslow, came out the door, Bible under one arm and disappointment hanging from the other. They barely spoke. Caleb didn't come back to preach. He didn't come back to please. He came back to feel something again. And that something had red hair and eyes like a storm. Ruby didn't ask questions. She didn't smile when he walked into the Scarlet Lantern, and she sure didn't flirt. But she looked. Lord, did she look? A woman can't help it when her past walks through the door wearing a new face and old memories. They'd known each other once, years back, when she was still named Lillian May Harper, and he was the boy too shy to look her in the eye. But life had pulled them apart like barbed wire through cotton. She'd been sent off after some shameful mistake that no one in town ever dared speak of. Caleb had been sent to learn how to be a proper man of God, but I reckon neither of them found what they were looking for, and yet there they were, same town, same air, same ache. He ordered coffee, not whiskey, said he didn't come to drink. "You can't save me," she whispered once when no one else was listening. "I ain't asking to be saved." "I didn't come to save you," he said. "I came to remember who I was, before the world decided for me." I ain't never heard silence that heavy before. The saloon girls teased Ruby after he left, called her preacher's pet. But I saw the way she looked at the door he'd walked out of, like it hurt to breathe, like every part of her was saying, "Don't hope," but her heart, it was already gone. They didn't meet in daylight after that. No, they were smarter than that. Dust Creek didn't take kindly to saints mixing with sinners. They met in the back pew of the chapel long after the candles burned out, and the old organ fell silent. She'd sit with her head bowed, he with his fingers laced in prayer, and they wouldn't talk. Not at first. Just sit. Just be. And maybe that was what they both needed. Some nights, he'd leave her a note tucked in the spine of the hymnal. Just a line or two. "I remember your laugh." Or, "You still carry the sky in your eyes." She never wrote back, but she'd return again and again. They were living in borrowed time, both of them. Caleb knew his father would find out. Ruby knew Mr. Price, the saloon owner, kept eyes everywhere, and he didn't take kindly to his girls having thoughts of freedom. She was his best earner, and in a place like Dust Creek that made her valuable in the worst way. Still, they met, because love don't care about danger. It don't ask permission. It just shows up uninvited and takes whatever it wants. But there's always a cost, always. You ever watch two people try to love each other in a place that don't allow it? It's like watching fire and water kiss, beautiful and doomed. Caleb started missing sermons. Ruby started wearing that lace ribbon in her hair again, the one her mama gave her before she died. She was softening, even though she didn't want to. And Caleb, he was hardening in ways that scared him. That quiet preacher's son had a temper underneath, and I saw it crack through the surface more than once when someone dared speak her name with filth in their mouth. One night, I caught him in the stable, punching the wall till his knuckles bled. I asked if he was all right. He didn't answer, just looked up and said, "If you love someone the world hates, do you become their shield, or do you become like the world?" I didn't have an answer then. I still don't. But I knew, standing there in that bitter winter wind, that Caleb Winslow was about to make choices that would break him, all for a woman he was never meant to touch. Would you? If loving someone meant losing your place in the world, would you risk it? Caleb did, and so did she. It didn't happen all at once. Love never does. Not the kind that hides behind corners and slips through locked doors. It starts in the quiet, where no one's watching, in the little spaces between glances and silences. That's where Ruby and Caleb lived, in the spaces no one else dared step into. By February, the snow had crusted the roofs of Dust Creek like a funeral shroud. Folks trudged through the streets with their collars up and their hearts closed. But there, in the back pew of a crumbling chapel, two souls thawed, slow, cautious, like spring beneath the ice. They didn't speak much. Ruby would sit with her hands folded in her lap, that same lace ribbon tying back her hair like a whisper from her old life. Caleb sat beside her, never too close, never too far. And they'd just listen, to the wind howling through the broken, stained glass, to the creak of old wood, to each other's breathing. Some nights he'd hum the tune of a hymn his mother used to sing before she passed. Ruby never joined in, but I saw her fingers tapping to the rhythm on her skirt. And then the letters started. At first, they were simple things, scraps of parchment, a few words at a time, left in the pocket of a coat, slipped beneath the chapel pew, hidden behind the loose stone near the well. Messages meant for no one else in this world. I dreamt of your voice last night. Do you ever wonder what the sky looks like in places that don't know our names? I would trade heaven for one day of truth with you. Ruby didn't write back, not with ink. But one morning, Caleb found a pressed violet between the pages of his father's sermon book. Violet was Ruby's favorite flower. She'd once told him that in the summer of '72, long before she was Ruby, when she was still Lillian, and he was just the preacher's boy with dirt on his boots and ink on his fingers. That flower said more than any letter ever could. But not everyone in Dust Creek was blind. Mr. Price, the owner of the Scarlet Lantern, had a mean sense for things that didn't belong to him. And Ruby, well, she was a possession in his eyes, a name on a ledger, a product to be sold by the hour. Her freedom was something he never intended to give. He started watching her, asking questions. Caleb noticed it too, the way men began whispering when he walked into the saloon, how his father refused to speak his name from the pulpit, how churchgoers stopped shaking his hand. The town was turning, slowly, like a noose tightening around something too beautiful to survive here. I remember the night Ruby showed up at the chapel with a bruise on her cheek, her hair loose, her lips trembling, not from fear, but from fury. "I won't be caged anymore," she said. Caleb didn't touch her. He just looked at her like a man looks at a sunrise he thought he'd never see again. "I don't want you to be," he whispered. That was the first time they kissed. Not in passion, in defiance. It was soft, quiet, like a prayer said only once in a lifetime. But even in that sacred moment, they knew the truth. They were building a house on sand, and the tide was coming. Would you keep building if the only thing waiting was ruin? They did. They met behind barns and in the canyon just outside town, where the rocks glowed red under the moonlight and coyotes sang like old souls. Ruby started bringing a small book of poetry with her, Emerson mostly. Caleb listened as she read aloud, her voice trembling in the cold. Sometimes she'd fall silent halfway through a line. He never asked why. He just waited, because love doesn't rush the wounded. It waits at the door until the broken heart dares open again. Still, every night they stole was a thread unraveled. The preacher grew colder. Mr. Price grew crueler. The town grew louder. And Ruby began to dream of places that didn't ask her to choose between shame and survival. But dreams don't change the ground beneath your feet, and secrets don't stay buried forever. The snow began to melt. The roads turned to mud. The creek ran faster, and I remember thinking, something's coming, a reckoning. If you had to stand against everything you've ever known, your name, your blood, your God, for the person you love, would you? Because they were about to find out. If your love became the reason you were hated, would you still call it love? Dust Creek had never been kind, not really. But it knew how to keep its distance. Folks lived by a code of silence out here. Don't ask, don't speak, don't get involved. But love, especially forbidden love, has a way of turning silence into noise. It rattles fences, it opens mouths, it makes good people cruel. And by the time spring thawed the snow from the hills, the town was whispering. It started in the pews. Small glances, half-turned shoulders when Caleb stood to sing beside his father. Then came the narrowed eyes in the saloon, the hush that fell whenever Ruby stepped outside for air. You could feel it in the wind, tight and sharp, like something about to break. Even the children stopped saying his name. I saw it in Ruby first. She began keeping her hair tied tighter, her steps quieter. That fire in her walk dimmed. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the back steps of the lantern, still in her corset, smoking a cigarette with trembling fingers. She didn't look at me, just said, "They don't even need to say it to my face. I can hear it in the way they shut doors." Mr. Price, of course, was feeding the fire. He'd always held power in Dust Creek, the kind of power you don't vote for, the kind you pay for in silence. When he found out Ruby was sneaking out, meeting Caleb under chapel arches and canyon moons, he didn't rage. He didn't shout. He smiled. And that was worse, because a man like Price didn't punish you with fists. He punished you with fear. He started docking Ruby's pay, locking her door at night, sending her to the ugliest men who tipped the heaviest. He wanted her broken, bent back into shape. But Ruby was made of something he couldn't touch. The more he pushed, the more she clung to Caleb. And Caleb was beginning to split down the middle. His father, Reverend Winslow, had grown hard as stone. I watched that man stand in his own pulpit, fire in his voice, preaching judgment without ever saying names. But everyone knew who he meant. When the righteous yoke themselves to the fallen, they too shall be cast down, he shouted one Sunday. And Caleb stood there, jaw clenched, sweat on his brow, refusing to sit. That night they fought. The whole town heard it. Glass shattered. A door slammed. Caleb stormed out of the preacher's house with a bleeding lip and fire in his eyes, and for the first time since he was a boy, he didn't look back. He went straight to her, and that night he didn't go home. You ever seen two people cling to each other like they know the world is about to rip them apart? That's how they held on, and the town, it watched, and it waited. People stopped attending church. Donations dried up. The Reverend stood taller in his sermons, but I saw it. He was unraveling. The scandal had teeth, and it was devouring his pride. Ruby wasn't safe anymore, not just from Mr. Price, but from the people she walked past every day. They started throwing words like stones: whore, witch, homewrecker. She kept her head high, but her shoulders curled in like she was bracing for a storm she couldn't outrun. And Caleb? He tried to shield her. But how do you shield someone from a town that's decided you're the sickness? He came to me one morning, fists clenched in his coat pockets, eyes red from lack of sleep. "I don't know what to do," he said. "If I stay, they'll destroy her. If I leave, I abandon everything I've ever known." I looked at him, this boy I'd watched grow into a man, and I saw the answer already inside him. Because when love is real, it demands everything, even your name, even your God, even your home. And Caleb, he was ready to give it. They started planning, not for a wedding, not for a future filled with white fences and church bells. No, they planned an escape, a train north, a little town past the border where no one knew their names. A piece of land Ruby had once read about in a magazine, where the trees turned gold in the fall, and women didn't need permission to be free. But plans like that, they don't stay secret for long, especially not in a town that thrives on silence, then bleeds on truth. If you had to burn every bridge behind you just to walk toward the one person who sees your soul, would you? They did. But Dust Creek wasn't finished with them yet, and the price for loving wrong was about to be paid in blood. If your only chance at love meant losing everything that gave your life meaning, would you take it? Some don't. Most don't. But Caleb did, and so did Ruby. They didn't run out of foolish hope. They weren't kids anymore. They ran because staying meant slow death. Not the kind with blood or bullets, the kind that eats at you day by day, the kind where you wake up next to someone who doesn't love you in a town that doesn't forgive you, and you start forgetting who you are. They couldn't do that. Not to themselves, not to each other. So they planned. The train passed through every second Thursday. Midnight. Just a stop. 5 minutes at best. Caleb found out through the postmaster who used to drink with the conductor. A small cabin car would be open. If they could get on without drawing attention, they'd be in Wyoming by dawn. From there, anywhere. They stole moments to whisper these dreams in the canyon, under the cottonwoods where the rocks held the sun's warmth long after sunset. Ruby would bring scraps of paper torn from old books, maps, clippings, the corner of a magazine with a cabin on a lake. Caleb brought matches and hope, but the world they were trying to escape, it was listening. Ruby's last week at the Scarlet Lantern was something I still can't forget. She walked like she had iron in her spine and glass in her throat. Mr. Price had grown suspicious. He locked her room at night, sent one of his men to follow her when she went to the market. But Ruby was clever. She bribed the youngest of the saloon girls, gave her a silver comb to pass Caleb a note hidden in her apron hem. "It's Thursday. Meet me behind the chapel, 1 hour to midnight. I'll wear the violet ribbon." The day came cold and gray. The sky hung low like it wanted to weep, but hadn't decided how. Caleb packed nothing but a change of clothes and his mother's cross. He didn't say goodbye to his father. What would have been the point? They hadn't looked each other in the eyes for weeks. I saw him just once before he left, and he hugged me, tight, like a man already grieving something he hadn't even lost yet. "You think it's wrong," he asked me, "to want something no one else understands?" I shook my head. Wrong ain't always the same as unholy, I said, and loving someone fully, that's closer to God than most sermons I've heard. He nodded, like he'd been waiting his whole life to hear those words. That night I waited too, behind the stable, hidden, watching. The chapel door creaked open, and there she was, Ruby, hair braided, violet ribbon shining in the dark like a whisper from another life. She wasn't wearing rouge, and her face looked smaller without it. But her eyes, Lord, those eyes, they weren't afraid. Caleb took her hand like he was reaching for something he thought he'd never deserve. And together, they moved through the shadows like they were part of them. They were almost to the train yard when it happened. A shot cracked the night. Sharp, sudden, final. Ruby dropped to her knees. Caleb screamed, not words, just sound. Raw, broken. She wasn't hit. But the bullet had been a warning. And the man holding the rifle, Mr. Price's right hand, a coward named Ellis, stepped from the shadows with a sneer that made my blood boil. "You think you can just walk out," he hissed. "She belongs here." "No," Caleb said, stepping in front of her. "She doesn't belong to anyone." Another shot. This one hit Caleb's shoulder. He staggered, blood darkening his coat, but he didn't fall. Ruby stood, and that was when she reached beneath her dress and pulled out the small pistol she'd kept hidden for years. She didn't even hesitate. One shot, straight to Ellis's gut. He went down with a howl and didn't get back up. The train whistle sounded in the distance. They looked at each other. No time to speak, just eyes full of fire and pain and something close to forever. Caleb's arm was bleeding bad, but he wrapped it in her ribbon, and they ran. They made it to the train. Barely. As the wheels thundered forward, I watched them vanish into the dark. Two souls stitched together by blood, defiance, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission. The town woke to scandal, to whispers, to judgment. But me, I woke to silence, to peace, because for once, love had outrun the hate. But freedom always comes with a cost, and the price for escaping Dust Creek wasn't paid in full. Not yet. If love cost you the only life you ever knew, but gave you one that was finally yours, would it be worth it? The world don't slow down when hearts break. It spins on, cold and indifferent, like train wheels over iron, never stopping for what it crushes along the way. But memories don't move on. They stay, like the scent of her hair, or the blood on his shirt, or the way she laughed when she thought no one heard. It's been 17 years since that night. 17 winters since I saw them disappear into the dark. Ruby with her pistol, Caleb with her ribbon tied around his arm. I never saw them again. Not truly, but sometimes I hear from them. Letters, once a year. No return address. Just a different postmark each time. Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and once Montana. Always in spring. Always written in Caleb's careful hand. Her hair's turned silver at the ends, he wrote once, but she still wears that same violet ribbon. Another year. We've a little girl now, red curls, your smile. She named the dog Dusty, and last spring, Ruby's been coughing more. Won't let me fuss. Says the fire's still in her bones and the lace still fits. She's as stubborn as ever. I read those letters by lantern light, tucked behind the stable where no one bothers me. And I remember them as they were. Two wounded souls, wrapped in defiance and desire, daring the world to tell them no. Dust Creek moved on, of course. The saloon changed hands. The Reverend passed away, bitter and alone. Folks still whisper about that preacher's boy who ran off with the whore, But time softens even the cruelest tongues. The legend of Ruby and Caleb became more story than scandal. Funny how that happens. But I remember, and tonight, as the snow falls soft and slow on the roof, I sit by the fire with their last letter on my lap. It's different this time. Short, the handwriting shaky. She's gone, peacefully, in her sleep. I buried her by the river beneath the cottonwoods. She always loved the way the light hit the leaves there. I'm writing this with her lace ribbon in my hand. I thought you'd want to know. She asked me to tell you, thank you, for seeing her when no one else did. See, don't you? I fold the paper slow, careful. Like if I move too fast, I'll break the moment. And I think back to that girl in the saloon, that boy in the chapel, how the world tried to crush them, shame them, break them. But it couldn't, because love, real love, don't ask if it's convenient. It don't ask if it's proper. It just is. It survives, and sometimes, if you're lucky, it leaves behind a story worth telling. So, if you had to choose between honor and love, let me ask you now, what would you choose?